I am going to turn this on anyway, in the event, you know, you do want to use internet or anything. Some are still off. Yeah.
Is the phone not right there?
No, that's
Camouflaging.
So if you do want to utilize wireless, then you can actually, from here, your own comfort,
we won't.
just, you can move it around, utilize it. All right.
So we're starting?
Yeah, I would say we should get started. Yes, thank you. Hi.
So good morning. Thanks for coming this morning. I'm Rami Miransky. This is my daughter Haley, and we represent HST rebate specialists. Let me ask a question first, and I know the answer to this. How many of you know someone who's bought a new condo or a new home? How many of you know someone who's bought a new condo or a new home for investment purposes? Everybody. And how many of you know an individual who's bought a home, either substantially renovated it, either by gutting it or completely knocked it down and built a new home? Okay, some of you? Okay. There are rebates available for each of those situations. Let's talk, and you have a pamphlet here. So let's talk about number one. This is called the HST New Housing Rebate, and there are basically three subcategories to that. Number one, a home or condo bought from a builder. And has anybody acted for an individual who's bought a home or a condo for a builder? And are you familiar with the HST New Housing Rebate? It's in the agreement of purchase and sale. Yeah. Okay. So in the agreement of purchase and sale, it generally, when you buy from a new home or a new condominium from a builder, there's a clause in the statement that says you assign the rebate to the builder, and the builder will then net it out against the HST that has been charged for that property. So a $500,000 condo, for example, will be charged 13% HST, which is $65,000. That condo is worth more than $450,000, and there's two elements to this rebate. There's the federal portion, and there's the provincial portion. The federal portion does not apply to any home or condo or any residence, for that matter, over and above $450,000. You cannot get the federal portion, but you are eligible for the provincial portion. So on close of that particular condo or home, you will be asked, the buyer will generally be asked, are you buying this as a principal residence or are you buying this as a rental property? If you're buying it as a principal residence, you will get a credit for the rebate on your closing adjustments, okay? So the closing adjustments will say list price, HST, less any deposits, less any, all these, all the various elements of the closing adjustments, and then you will get a credit for $24,000 if the home is worth more than $450,000, and you have to pay a net price. So in this case, your buyer does not have to worry about the rebate, getting it back. It's already taken care of in the agreement of purchase and sale. Okay? Pretty easy. There are cases, however, that I've come across, smaller builders who build a small townhouse complex. I came across 14 condo townhouses on Shaw Street, downtown Toronto. None of them, it was not taken care of in the agreement of purchase and sale. Some of them knew about it already, hadn't applied for that themselves, but I talked about 3 or 4, said $24,000, I can get $24,000 back. Absolutely, and I helped them recover this money.
And then there are some situations where an individual builder builds one house or 2 houses a year and they're not aware of it and they don't write it into the purchase price. So the homeowner is actually able to then apply to the government and apply for this rebate on their own. The builder should be putting it into the purchase price because they could get in a bit of trouble for not charging HST properly,
Yeah.
but
You are supposed to a builder is supposed to charge HST on a new build or substantially renovated property. But substantially renovated property, I mean, it has to be a 90% guttable. They're supposed to. Often they don't, and often they bypass it by putting in names of family members, etc. I'm not here to talk about the legality of that. That's what happens out there. But in the case where a corporation sells it to a homeowner, and the corporation has built the home, and the corporation has substantially renovated the home, they're supposed to charge HST. Now, again, in the agreement of purchase and sale, it'll say if HST, I think it's clause 7 or 8 on most APS, it'll say if HST is not specifically outlined, it is assumed embedded in the purchase price. And we have gotten one of Haley's good friends bought a substantially renovated home. The agreement of purchase and sale was between corporation and individual. They should have charged HST. They did not specifically outline it, so it was assumed embedded, and we managed to get her back $24,000, and she was very happy.
paid off her car.
She paid off her car. Okay. So those are one-off situations, but they are one-off situations that could help clients who have engaged in that kind of transaction. Okay. We have this pamphlet here. I'm going to skip to the last item number 3, which is buying a principal residence as an investment property. Sorry, not a principal residence. Buying a residence or an investment real estate investment. Okay. There is a rebate available for that. It's called the new housing rental rebate. Okay. So you buy a house, you buy a condo, and it's very evident normally in condos. You know, half the condos, or say 100% of the condos, there's an element of people buying condos for investment purposes. You will be asked before you close, is this your principal residence or is this a rental property or investment property, correct? Come across that situation? Well, what happens if you say it's an investment property? Anybody know? What will happen with the HST?
You need to pay up front.
You have to pay up front, exactly. You have to pay up front, so a $500,000 condo, you'll have to pay $565,000 without any other, adjustments, etc. And then you must to get the rebate, you must have a 1-year lease in place, and then you can apply to the federal government to get your rental rebate back. But you must pay the HST up front. Very common. A lot of people don't know that they can get this rebate back. And it doesn't have to be a Canadian citizen. It can be someone offshore, Lots of Asian buyers, people in Europe, etc., buy properties in Canada. It's a good, stable environment for real estate. They buy rental properties here. They don't know that they can apply for the rebate even though they're offshore, but they are eligible. And in fact, one of the individuals who was in that particular property that I told you about on Shaw Street lived in Asia, and we managed to get her rental rebate back. Okay? Yes.
Is it the same 25,000, like the same rules
It
around?
it can be 24,000. It can be higher if the property is actually worth less than $450,000 to a sliding scale of 350. At 350, you'll get back $30,000. As it moves up to 450, there is a formula that as you get closer and closer to 450, it becomes minuscule. So somebody at $449,000 will get back about $60 on a federal rebate, but they'll still get the provincial rebate of $24,000. Okay. Important to know, there is a 2-year limitation period. So you have 2 years to apply for the rebate from occupancy. Normally, the sale date or occupancy is the same thing, or the lease agreement when that comes to play.
Who applied that? The new
homeowner,
automatically just by the
The homeowner only has to does not have to apply if it's their principal residence. Yeah. If there's a clause in the APS that says I'm assigning the rebate to the builder, to whom I'm purchasing from. But on a rental rebate, they must apply
So
for
in
it.
my particular case here, I sold a property about a year and a half ago for over $3 million,
Okay.
right? And it's, it wasn't from the builder, but the builder occupied that house for probably for 10 months. Is that considered?
No, no. If the the builder lived in it for 10 months?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the sale of a residential property, there's no HST.
Or there's no
That's why
No.
people live in it, right? To avoid having to pay HST on resale. If it's your primary residence and you've lived there for, I don't know, they say 1 year, it's
Yeah,
tricky
the
whether it's
builder-
actually.
The builder lived there for 10 months and he sold it as a new house, he said.
As he sold it, well, I'm sure did it come with warranties?
Yes, of course.
It came with warranties.
Yes.
The
That's the
builder,
u-
but
that's
the builder lived in it, and
Yeah.
so was considered his principal residence. And as a result, when he sold it to the buyer, there was no HST, so it wasn't really considered a new home.
Okay.
The builder may have decided to give some warranties to the buyer, just as a, you know, as a goodwill
So the
gesture.
Italian warranty come with the house.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that would apply, right?
No, that would not apply.
So as another condition, you have to be the first person to occupy
The
the
first
house.
occupant.
So that's too bad.
That's, yeah. Hopefully the builder applied for it and
Probably the builder applied for it already, right? And they took the rebate.
Possibly, yeah, possibly, they could have. If the builder has not, he still has about 6 months to do it, if they bought it a year and a half ago. So, you know, happily talk to the buyer and connect with the builder to see. Often though, builders are reluctant to apply for it because it opens them up to a lot of scrutiny. You know, you're supposed to live in a house for a year. Was your intention to live in the house for a year? What changed? The government will ask some questions. Are you trying to bypass, you know, tax law? Because if you're a builder, they will audit that file right away. They will see, you know, XYZ person. Oh, what's his occupation? Oh, he's a contractor builder. Oh, he built this home. Let's make sure all the invoices, first of all, are in his personal name and not in his corporate name. Because you can't take the rebate if they're,
Do you think it's worthwhile for my client to buy it?
your client cannot get the rebate back.
No.
100%. No.
Thank you.
Actually, I have two questions. First of all, if the occupancy is 2 years ago,
Yes,
and it was tenanted,
yes.
the calculation for 1 year lease agreement is from the occupancy or closing date?
No, it's from the, it's
it's from closing.
it's from the closing day when you get ownership. So it was interim ownership that they had, it was interim occupancy that they had,
Yes.
and then they rented it at that point.
Yes.
So they had not paid the HST yet.
It is rebating me.
Yeah, no, they had not paid HST on the closing.
HST, as far as I know, HST is on the purchase price, only HST rebate they can apply, not HST.
HST rebate, they don't get all the HST back, they get a percentage of. So let me get this scenario straight, there's interim closing, there was a rental agreement. What happened on closing? Who was in possession? Who took,
Is the next question.
is it still being rented?
If it is rented, the owner can apply for that.
Yes.
But my question is that the occupancy agreement.
No, it's from ownership,
From the,
from the actually closing of the agreement of purchase and sale,
yeah, but
not interim.
by law, it is minimum 1 year lease
Lease,
agreement.
yes,
But when on occupancy, it is, for example, 6 months before the closing date, means the agreement is remains 6 months.
that's, shouldn't be an issue.
Remain.
If the agreement was issued before closing, they're fine,
Okay, how about 2 years ago, it was occupancy and tenanted,
yes.
not closed yet. It is occupancy,
It hadn't closed yet?
not yet. And the owner decided to assign sell the apartment in assignment.
Right.
The new owner is entitled for the
The new owner is entitled to the HST rebates as an owner, but not on the rental rebate.
If the tenant is the assignee, then he could apply as a new home when it closes. Because he's paying the closing fees when it closes, and the new owner will have to pay the taxes.
The assignment was for an individual to rent it, or was for an individual to own it?
No, to rent it.
To rent it.
There's a tenant over
Yes.
there. 2 years ago, it was occupancy.
So they assigned the tenant so the tenant stayed with the new owner?
No, assignment it is
For the,
someone else,
yeah.
not the tenant.
No, I understand, but the new owner get the tenant as part of the deal.
Yes,
Did they
The
take over
same,
the tenant?
the same tenant continued.
yes. Not the same tenant,
Hasn't
another tenant.
Okay, so,
We don't know what is the intention of the new owner.
so the new tenant would have signed a new agreement when the assignee, the person got this condo, would have gotten a new tenant. Signed a 1-year lease agreement, they would be eligible. Now you have to be very careful with the 2-year
Actually,
timer.
again, I have.
They're very strict about the 2-year timer.
But it hasn't closed yet.
Not closed yet.
Oh, it's not closed yet. Oh, it's not closed yet, then it's fine.
No, on closing, who has to pay HST rebate?
It depends what the contract says between the assignee and the assignor. They should have indicated.
If it's new, somebody's gonna have to pay that HST, and I would imagine that it would have to be the new
Because
owner.
I heard 2 weeks ago, it is very important who leaves after occupancy. Doesn't matter. On closing in this scenario,
See, now you're asking real estate questions, you're not
not
asking.
the HST rebate.
Yeah.
Another thing is high.
Well, no, you're talking about the rebate, you're talking about who is responsible for the HST. Who is responsible for the HST is a real estate question, it's not a rebate question.
HST is included.
They are two, and they're,
No, I don't understand.
yeah, understand?
But how about the the difference between the HST? For example, that guy bought 350,000.
Right.
On occupancy, actually rented out. On closing, assignment price is 450,000. Who pays the difference with 100,000?
That, I will
It's
defer on
HST.
that, I will defer on that question, I can
Lawyer
happily assess.
Yeah.
It's a lawyer question, it is a lawyer question, and you should have the expertise in here because it happens all the time to answer that
We
question.
got a call like that not long ago, and I had to say, I don't want to give you the wrong answer because I'm not certain of it.
I
So
mean,
you have to-
assignment goes on all the time and, particularly in condos, but I don't want to answer a question, don't want to answer it incorrectly. But I would think you'd have the expertise in an office like this to answer that question, or the lawyers that you deal with out there, it should be an easy answer. Anybody know the answer to that question? Has anybody come across that situation? One thing you have to be wary of with respect to the rebate is when you have multiple owners, each owner has to be eligible for the rebate in order to get the rebate. Now, sometimes you get a young husband and wife, young couple, and one of their parents is on the agreement of purchase and sale because they want to help them out and help with financing. That situation is fine because it's an immediate family member. You can get into a situation where, let's say, a close uncle or aunt who are not immediate family members, and I mean by brother, sister, mother, father, grandparents, children, okay? Those are the situations. If an uncle or aunt or a close friend who wants to help out this young couple by putting his or her name on title, they may screw up the rebate process. Now, there are ways around it. You can get affidavits signed and send them to the government and say, this is only for financing purposes, but normally that'll create a situation for those individuals. So it's best not to put the name of a non-arm's length, of a non-arm's length person, an arm's length person on title. Non-arm's length person would be immediate family, arm's length would be outside immediate family, because it'll create situations with getting the rebate back. Okay. Anybody coming under that situation, seen that situation before? Okay. Last issue, the HST new housing rebate for owner-built homes. Anybody know someone who has, as I say, gutted their home or torn down an existing home and built a new home? No one?
Don't know that situation.
You don't know that situation? You're being facetious? No? You don't know a friend, relation, business associate who's torn down a home and built a new home or gutted their home?
Yeah, we know, but we were in that situation.
Okay, no, I'm just asking if you know anyone in that situation. Of course you know someone who's done that.
There's 3 on his block.
On
in
my block
Toronto.
alone, I live at Bathurst and Eglinton. There's 2 new builds. Across the road, there's actually 4. Across the road, they did a huge addition and gutted the interior, and then another one about 4 doors down on the same side as me, big gut of their home with a huge addition at the back. All those people are eligible, as long as it's their principal residence, all those people are eligible for the HST new housing rebate for owner-built homes. Okay? $16,080.
Does it have a time limit?
Again, same time limit, 2 years from the date of occupancy of substantial completion.
So an issue that a lot of people we speak to come across is the fact that their house is worth more than $450,000. They think it is an issue because if you open the guide, one of the first paragraphs say you're only entitled to this rebate if your home is worth less than $450,000. However, that's just the federal portion. You apply to the federal portion to get back your $16,080, but there is also a provincial.
No, the federal rebate is only worth maximum $6,300. Okay, the provincial rebate, and there's no limit, there's no cap to the value of the home. So I've done rebates for people, you know, center of Forest Hill have an $8 million home, Bridle Path, $8 million home, $5 million home in Richmond Hill or Aurora, et cetera, very big 8,000 square foot homes. They're still eligible for that $16,080, even though their home is worth, you know, $5 or $8 or even $10 million or more. Now you would think, for someone who builds an $8 or $10 million home, that $16,000 is not significant. But I must tell you, the people that, the wealthier the individual and the more tax they pay to the federal government, the happy they are to get this money.
So the maximum is
$16,080. It can be $24,000 if you buy a development lot. So it doesn't happen in the GTA because not in the city of Toronto, it doesn't happen that often to find a vacant piece of land that you pay HST on. But did one recently in Thornhill where they had bought the land from a development company, paid HST, and then they were allowed $24,000. They were allowed the $16,000 on the new build and the $8,000 of additional HST that they paid on the land when they purchased this lot. So it can be as high as $24,000.
Again, it can also be $24,000 if you convert a commercial property into a residential property, because usually you also are paying tax on the land.
Yeah, you don't want to really do that.
okay. I have one question. I do quite a number of land assembly, right? We bought like 4 old property, you know,
Yes.
like for $2 million each, right? On closing, is there subject to HST?
Are you building a Terrion home?
Yeah, it's going to be done, going to build like a.
Well, Terrion home, you must charge HST. Are you registered with Terrion and are building a brand new home?
Yes.
Then you must charge HST. It's the law.
So the new developer will pay the HST, right?
So let me get this straight. You bought some development lots.
Yeah.
You were going to sell them off or sell them, build on them and sell the properties?
I sell it to a developer.
You sell it to the developer. Okay, the developer will pay the HST on the land.
Okay, so the new owner can get the rebate.
The new owner can get the rebate.
Okay.
The owner of the newly built house, the principal resident of the house, is the only person that can apply for the rebate. You can assign the rebate to the builder if it's a new condo or home, and then get credit for it on the closing adjustments, but you have to physically sign the rebate agreement and assign the rebate to the builder.
So we must be very careful when we read the agreement, right? Where is the HST going to be payable? Sometimes, you know, the builder is very smart, you know, they said, you know, like.
It's the builder that's gonna get in trouble, not the homeowner.
Is it?
Yes,
I know.
because it'll say in that clause, and again, it's pretty standard across all agreements of purchase and sale, and it's usually on the second page. It's usually about 2/3 of the way down, 3/4 of the way down, and it talks about HST, and it will say, and I'm paraphrasing, but it'll say, if HST is not clearly, you know, shown as a separate item, it is assumed to be included in the price if HST eligible. Now, that clause is irrelevant on a resale of one homeowner to another homeowner, but it's not irrelevant when it's a homeowner, when it's a builder who's built a new home and sold it to someone and then neglected to charge them HST. The HST is embedded and they've all signed the contract, so it's embedded. So that buyer can then go back and get the HST rebate. And then the government will come after the builder and say, you know, that $1 million home that it included HST of $100,000 $20,000 approximately, well, you owe us that money. I've seen some horror stories out there happen, actually. Yeah.
So is that mean if the owner bought a property and tearing down and built, and they're gonna occupy themselves, they're still eligible to?
$16,080 based on invoices of just over $300,000.
So
Listen,
but you need to have to estimate the value?
Yeah, you have to estimate the value, but I mean, if you're building a house, it's land and property value. Where can you find a house in the GTA that's worth, it's very rare to find a house worth less than $450,000. The one that you're talking about, do you think it's worth less than $450,000? It doesn't exist. Maybe smaller condos, maybe where you're going out to Port Perry or Port Hope or Belleville, somebody smaller towns. And I've done them in those locations where these homes are worth $350,000, $400,000, and gotten them the federal rebate and the provincial. I was just going to give you an anecdotal story where a builder buys a home, builder takes an existing home, guts it, okay? Sells it through the corporation, but he assumed because it was not a tear-on home, it was not a new build from foundation up, that he did not have to charge HST. However, he is supposed to charge HST because the federal government doesn't care what the provincial government says. So he sold this home, corporation to homeowner. The homeowner then was contacted by someone who does the same thing as me, helped people get the rebate back. They determined that there was enough done in this home to qualify as new housing as defined by the federal government, and they submitted the application and they got their rebate. The builder was then contacted by the CRA and said, you owe us money for this house because you substantially renovated. They got the plan, so he got it 90%, he got it 100% of the home. He hired a big time lawyer from Faskins. They argued in tax court and he lost. The builder lost because the federal rules don't care about the provincial rules. And he did it very cleanly from a tax point of view because let's say, I don't know the exact numbers, this was related to me. Let's say he bought the property for $800,000. He put $400,000 in renovations, 1.2 million. He sold it for 1.6, difference of $400,000. He claimed that as income, business income, paid the income tax on it. The government said, okay, we're going to adjust that because you owe us $120,000, your gain is not $400,000 anymore, it's $280,000, but you still owe us money. And then they went back to 11 properties that he had done a similar thing to. So we have to watch, and I'm sure you may have seen this out there, all sorts of funny things go out in the real estate world with respect to ownership, because builders like to try to bypass taxation. So they will put it in the name of a wife or a cousin or et cetera, or they will live in it for a year, which is fine. You live in it for a year, that's fine. If you're a builder, sometimes. If you're a builder, they might scrutinize you a little more closely and say, what was your intent here?